Well, Jack, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us here on the Music Business Dreams podcast, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. So, for people who aren't familiar with you, why don't you give us a brief introduction to who you are and what you do currently in the industry?
Sure. So I'm Jack Forman. I'm the president of BiCoastal Productions, a New York-based entertainment booking agency. We present, well, actually, I shouldn't say we present. We book shows all around the world, primarily in North America, with a roster of very diverse artists from anything from classic rock to modern pop to dance, comedy, a little bit of just about everything for anybody. And I've been working with the company now about 6 years, and our growth has just been so staggering. And yes, COVID-19 certainly all gave us a massive push and shock, but thankfully we've been able to navigate by really finding some great forward-thinking ideas and keeping our people engaged, keeping our buyers and artists engaged. That's really what it's all about, as an agent.
Absolutely. And so we're going to get into that, into the adjustments from COVID and everything in a little bit. First, I do want to take it back a bit. How did you get involved in the industry, or I should say, what first made you fall in love and say, okay, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's kind of like an addiction. Once you do it, you really can't do anything else in terms of wherever you'd want to work. Once you see that experience, it really does something for you that's unbelievable. And I started in college just interning with record labels. I did a semester in New York working on some music production projects, and in the meantime, I was just interning at electronic music labels and really just getting into that scene and really getting excited about it. And then shortly after, when I went back to Chicago to finish college, I ended up getting an internship at the Windish agency, which is now part of Paradigm. And then shortly after college, I was recruited to ICM Partners in New York, and I was working with a hip hop and R&B agent, and that completely rocked my world. I never thought I'd have experiences like I had in that job, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But it definitely was trial by fire and kind of set me up for transitioning to BiCoastal Productions a short while later. Where I got to be an agent right away and really just grow right with the company. But I've always loved working with bands. I've always loved developing artists and being a part of a creative team. I believe that behind every great artist of any kind is a group of people that have supported them in every possible way. I don't think any artist can really do it all.
Absolutely. So, what got you into, or kind of pushed you toward agency as opposed to maybe management or one of the other fields?
Well, it could have gone to management. I like the idea of having a set goal for just about everything I do. And being an agent is exciting. It's very stimulating. It can also be extremely tedious. There's a very famous meme on the internet of three pictures of one says what my parents think I do, and it's a guy crowd surfing at a concert.
Mhm.
And there's a picture said what my friends think I do, and it's a guy sitting on a beach. And then there's what I actually do, and it's an agent with just piles of folders on their head and just paperwork. So that's really the tedious part of it. But I wouldn't trade developing an artist and really seeing them on a massive stage with a massive group of people for anything. It really is. There's really nothing quite like it when you hit your groove with it and when you hit your stride with the right team. And I've been very, very blessed to find a great team of people to get behind me.
Absolutely. So, you've talked about how tedious the job can be. How would you describe, and I hate asking about a typical day in the music industry because there
No
isn't
problem.
one, but how would you describe like the day-to-day responsibilities of an agent?
Well, day to day before COVID was quite different than day to day now.
Mhm.
Now I'm blessed to be able to get out of bed and spend some time with my baby. But now before this, I was commuting into New York City every day, and we had a very long day. It's really there's really no 9 to 5 in any kind of entertainment business, but in our business, you're getting emails and calls at all hours of the day and night. I've had calls from people at 2 a.m. saying, "Hey, I can't. I'm settling my show right now, and the promoter's giving me a tough time. I need you to step in." And I'll roll out of bed and find a place to sit. And
Mhm.
it's I really like to start my day with the pressing tasks that have come in from the day before. I'm by nature not as organized and not as I guess as organized as you should be in this job. However,
Mm.
I really like having a handful of projects that I know I need to start off with from the time I leave the office to the next morning when I get back. I just have that all waiting for me. And there's a lot of meetings. I'm a big believer in just staying in touch with people on the phone. This is a relationship business, so even at my age, I'm still picking up the phone like crazy every day just to talk to people and hear what's going on in their lives and with their businesses. And now more than ever, working from home, we're on Zoom 24 hours a day. It's crazy.
Mm.
And when we're working with people overseas in other parts of Europe, like in Sweden or even as far out into Africa or Australia, you're finding weird times a day where you're having to get up and go on Zoom. But there's really no, you said it best. No 2 days are the same, but generally there's a lot of just talking to people, being in touch with your artists and being in touch with your buyers.
Absolutely. Okay. So, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, just kind of breaking in through different music industry internships. Um, how would you describe your experience in those internships, and how much they helped you decide what you wanted to do and help break you in?
An internship is really what you make it, and that's the truth with any internship. You can use it as an educational component, which is great, and that's what it's there for. But if you really want to make it a stepping stone or a future job, you really have to find a way of pushing past just the general internship curriculum. And the record label I interned with first in Brooklyn was a smaller electronic label called Trouble and Bass that was run by a group of amazing electronic music producers. And I went down with them to Miami for Miami Music Week, and I did anything they asked, but I also really showed them that I could really just think outside of what they were just regularly asking me to do, and really put in hours that you'd never believe. I worked the door, I worked social media, I did just about everything. But that really led me to the Windish agency, and I would find a project and I would get it done that day. Even though they'd say, "All right, this is your project for the week," I'd make sure I'd get it done that day and ask for more.
Mm.
These positions, or whatever you want to call them, are priceless, and you can either just get through them and get your college credit, or you can use them to really slot you into the next place. And I don't think I would have gone to ICM with the hip hop agents if they wouldn't have seen what I was doing at Windish. So it all is just a ladder, and you really have to treat it like it's the hardest job you've ever done, and really put in more than just the bare minimum.
Absolutely. So, for somebody who's aspiring to break into the industry, what are some tips you'd give them to go about finding those internships and really, I guess, shining through among applicants?
I think it's important for people to know you. Because even if somebody has a slightly better qualification than you, maybe they went to a better college, or they may have dropped a cool name. If you're constantly surrounding yourself with the people who are either decision makers or even the receptionists at these agencies, or any or record label, whatever it may be, go to where you see these people going to hang out. If there's a bar in town that a lot of the local business people hang out in music, or there's local shows, just make sure you're there, just so they're familiar with you, so you can say to them in your cover letter, "By the way, I had a great time chatting with you last week at this show." Or if they know you and they can put a face to that personality, they'll be able to tell right away if that personality is somebody that they want coming around their office and being a part of their team. I think that's the biggest thing you can do. Obviously, a stellar resume and great recommendations. If you're a student, make sure your professors are involved with that. I had a couple of professors write me recommendations for it, but just using any possible means of people. My first internship I got through my cousin, who randomly was just an assistant for one of these artists, and he just made a call, and that was my in. And I think I can probably thank him for my entire career because of that.
Absolutely. So, we've talked about the kind of the series of internships and how these were stepping stones. Where do you feel like you finally hit your stride and said, "Okay, yeah, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm doing well at it"?
I think I mean, I guess there would be two times. I mean, the first time was in college when I was at the Windish agency. I really loved all of their artists on their roster, and there really is no Windish agency anymore. It's now been absorbed by Paradigm, but at the time they just had all the great electronic musicians and all the great, all the great indie acts and even bigger acts. And I would work so tirelessly at that internship that one of the agents in the electronic world took notice, and he said, if you want to spend another semester, we'll have you back. If you want to do a concurrent internship where you're working just for me and my assistant, you can do that, and I'll have you here, and you can spend your summer here in Chicago. And I said, absolutely. And that's when I started doing that work, and I was working on things for more specific artists, artists that I was loving at the time. In college I was all about electronic music, and this agent represented people like Dylan Francis and Justice and all these massive acts that I just idolized. Bonobo, and I'd be working on their tours, I'd be working on projects for them, and that's when I really got just all in. And then after college, I'd say really it's been here at BiCoastal. It's just it's all about finding the right people to keep you motivated every day, that get you excited. Because I think if you are able to work in the arts and make a living in the arts, you kind of need to thank God every day that you have that opportunity, because it's a blessing. It really is, and you can't take any day of it for granted.
Absolutely. So right now, I kind of want to transition into more tips for the artist side of this equation. So I know one of the more difficult things, it seems, is for an independent artist to land a booking agent and start help getting shows and tours booked and things like that. As an agent, what are things that you look for in a potential artist client?
Well, I think not every artist is ready, and the artists need to really take a look at their careers. And if they're working with a team, the team needs to look at the artist's career and really determine if they've reached a point where they need an agent. Because that's oftentimes what leads an agent to either ignore them or just not be interested in representing them, is that they're either not ready for an agent, or the agent you're approaching is just not the appropriate agent for your type of format. I remember, I just remember coming up and seeing what each agent looked at, and the constant for each agent was data. They looked at, nowadays it's more in the streaming data and Spotify data and all that, but as a booking agent who books concerts, you're obviously looking at the ticket data. If there's a small artist who's been playing the door at small clubs in various markets around the country, but those small clubs are selling out every night and they're walking away with enough money to keep their tour moving, and you can just tell that there's a great grassroots fan base growing in each market, that's an artist you may want to get behind and get in on early. I mean, there's so many cool stories about people that saw that early on, and then the artist blew up like crazy. And oftentimes for me, I get a lot of clients through referrals from other artists or managers we work with, or venues. Maybe an artist is at a venue and they're talking to the talent buyer there, and the talent buyer says, by the way, this artist is looking to leave their agency. They're looking for something a little bit more hands-on. We're a smaller team, so we're perfect for that type of client. Mm-hmm. And I'm just really looking for people who aren't just saying, all right, I got an agent, I'm set, book me. Because chances are, once you have an agent or a manager or a publicist or anything, or a label behind you, you're working incrementally harder each and every day. I mean, it's just, we're only as good as what you give us. Mm-hmm. And if you're a record label, it's the same exact thing. It's even more so. But for an agent, you're looking at what the path to success is going to be, and if the artist can tell you, what, this is my audience, this is where I'm selling my albums, this is who's buying my merchandise, and I can see that these markets in XYZ town are really, really heating up for me. If you show that to an agent and really make a case for where your career is headed and where they can visualize it, you're going to have a lot better chance of landing one, because they're going to see a lot less need to bang their head against the wall in terms of trying to get places to book you.
Absolutely. And we're in the age of data and analytics where it's very easy for anyone to say, hey, this is my audience, right? And it's easy to say, okay, hey, I've got, all 10 of my singles are at less than 1,000 streams, right? So maybe I'm not ready for an agent. Is there a certain, maybe like a minimum number or a certain threshold that agents are looking at?
It really depends. I mean, I've met agents that only work with artists whom I've never heard of, who may be on the up and up, who are strictly indie musicians, and they make their money by doing huge amounts of volume.
Mhm.
And then, a lot of my artists are not top in streaming data like crazy. I mean, I have certain artists that are much bigger online, and I look at YouTube views. Obviously, I have this act, Naturally Seven, who's just absolutely huge all around the world. But then I have other acts that really are doing a lot better numbers in certain markets, and then in others nobody knows who they are. It's amazing. I mean, once you go overseas, you'll find out that certain countries, your artist means a whole lot more than they ever would here. I have a client, Lee Rocker from the Stray Cats. He told me once that in Finland, the Stray Cats sold more records than the Beatles, which is insane. So when he goes to Finland, he's all of a sudden much more of a celebrity than he would be here. Walking around, chances are, if you're not a rockabilly fan, you're not going to notice him. But if you're in Finland, you probably will. So it really is a tough question to answer. You really look for different things depending on the type of shows and where you're going to be putting them. But again, it really all comes down to seeing consistent rising ticket data, and just the writing will be on the wall from the label or whomever it is sending you the ideas for the artist.
Absolutely. So, yeah, it's important to have rising numbers, and it's also important to be able to contextualize those numbers, because numbers won't always tell the whole story. But I mean, again, you know where your merch sales are going. You can see all of your data, whether you've got a Shopify store, whether you're looking at Spotify analytics or SoundCloud analytics. All the social media platforms, they're all giving out some form of insights. So there's a lot of ways to look at data and say, okay, this is where my trajectory is headed, and be able to present that to a decision maker, someone who can help take your career to the next level.
Yeah, 100%.
So, what are some misconceptions that you believe artists have about booking agents?
Similar to that meme. I mean, it's you get, if you ever watched Entourage, you get this visual of like an Ari Gold character of just this nasty screaming agent all the time, and
Mm,
sometimes we are that. I mean, the common misconception is that we're all, I guess, trying to hustle everybody and steal whatever we can, and really just take everybody for a ride. But that misconception comes from our need to be very forceful and tough sometimes when it comes to negotiations and
mm,
collecting money. I mean, I've had so many people try to take advantage of our artists, of our company, and I would much rather talk with somebody like you and I are speaking right now on a very respectful and friendly level, if I can, and most of my day is. But every so often, you do have to get a little bit tougher than you would want to, and every so often you have to get nasty, and
mm,
because this is your artist's life. You're not just collecting money in hopes that there's going to be a little more money in the bank. This is the artist's livelihood. This is your livelihood. And when it comes to collecting money, negotiating the best deals, sometimes it gets ruthless, which creates this common misconception that we're all kind of like sharks, and sometimes we are. But another thing is that again, that if once you have an agent, that you're going straight to the top, and that may not be the case. So many agents have rosters where only one or two of their clients are really hitting big, and
mm.
then the rest of their artists may be on the up. So there's a lot of misconceptions, and when it comes to how we act, I could always bring my wife out here, and she could tell you the real truth of what it is to deal with me. But chances are most of us nowadays are just trying to keep it peaceful and friendly, and just get the job done.
Absolutely. Okay. So I guess now we've reached the point in the conversation where we can talk about the big elephant in the room,
Yep.
right? So how do you feel, or how have you observed that COVID has really impacted, your industry, and where do you see things going?
It impacted us like crazy, but we really can't feel alone in it because it impacted everybody.
Mm,
And for concerts, the big problem is that there isn't a clear return that's unilateral across our country as to how it's going to look with venues reopening. There's not a set capacity. There's not a set government mandate. It is an election year, so there's all kinds of public opinion trying to be drawn up, which makes for our job being more and more stressful. But with with the cancellations and the rescheduling that has obviously impacted our company and our artists very severely, has also given birth to tremendous innovation in the fields of tech and in the fields of streaming and broadcast, and it's given artists a wonderful opportunity to find new ways of reaching their audiences remotely, where they maybe weren't doing as much of it before, and it gives venues a new use of their space if they're going to turn it into kind of like a makeshift TV studio where they're able to still stream shows, or even have a hybrid where there's a few people in the audience and then the rest of them are streaming. It's definitely scary, and it's uncomfortable, but it's still exciting. And that's really one thing that I've been focusing on, is partnering with a lot of these tech platforms and venues that are doing things like this, so that I can keep my artists busy and that I can keep my agents busy. That's really what's important to me, is keeping everybody just busy and creative. And I'm not the most creative guy, but if my creativity in this team can be in finding weird ideas like this to just keep everybody doing something, then I think that's what's going to push us through to the other side of this, however long it lasts.
Absolutely. So, so far, what are some of the ideas that you feel like have really been executed well and are like, okay, this is a step in the right direction?
Well, I personally take a lot of my direction, and I use it as a barometer with the world of sports. I watch a lot of sports, and ever since the pandemic happened, it's been a lot of pre-recorded sports. But right now, they're finally starting to bring it back, and I've been watching it without an audience in the venues where these events are happening, and it's very strange. It's very awkward. But what they're finding is more and more ways of enhancing the streaming atmosphere for the audience and for the athletes. There's one platform out there that literally allows you and I sitting here from our homes to cheer into a microphone on our computer or on our phone, and for it to be heard in the venue.
Wow.
I mean, that's something. Like if you're like, for instance, they're doing it now with boxing. If you're a boxer in the ring and you suddenly start hearing cheering again when you're fighting, when you're landing a rally, you're gonna really, that's gonna enhance your experience. And if you're a spectator, hearing your voice in the crowd on the broadcast, that's gonna be something. I mean, there's as they used to say, we have the technology, and now with artists, they've always had these platforms like Twitch and YouTube and Facebook and Periscope and what have you. But now they're finding ways of ticketing them and really monetizing them, because you can only do so much for free if you're an independent artist. You've got to put food on your table. You got to feed your family. And if you're able to find a way to ticket these live streams and use the services that are out there, and find your market and start hitting a groove with maybe a weekly webcast of your show, you can really do something with that's special. And maybe you only make enough money to go to the grocery store. Maybe you make enough money to pay your rent. It could be anything in between. And then the big artists are really making a lot of money. I've seen some artists literally clear upwards of $50K in one stream, and they didn't have to leave their house. That's insane. That's insane to me. It's just, and then obviously the big shows, the drive-ins, what they're doing with country music it's insane. Necessity is the mother of invention. They're always going to find a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I read a lot of comic books and I watch
That's
a lot
awesome.
of people streaming about them or whatever. Cause comic books come out every week, or they finally are
Yeah.
coming out again. They actually stopped for a little while during the pandemic. But with that, you'll see people on YouTube, they're streaming and they have what are called super chats, where people can, pay a little bit to make sure that whoever is streaming sees their comment and can respond to it. Right. So as a musician, you could do something similar, right? You may have, just like when you're performing at a live show, you've got your on stage banter in between songs. You could take that time to say, hey, Julie, thanks for the tip. I love you too, whatever it is, right? And you make that fan's day, but you're also, helping to offset the cost of doing business. So it's definitely something to look into. Just about
Yeah.
every platform has some sort of a tipping feature like that, nowadays.
Yeah, and you can thank the comic book fans and the gamers for really starting the rally of all the new technology that's made it more and more possible to do it from their homes, because that's really who musicians have to thank right now for all the technology, especially with Twitch,
Yeah.
is the people who get on YouTube and talk about comics, or the people who are gamers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Gamers, especially, like, there's
Yeah.
so many of them, and there's so much technology that was built really for that community. And now we're finding it's just as powerful and as good for musicians. Like, there's plenty of software. There's OBS, where
Yeah.
you can stream for free. You can create overlays. Like, you can really make a nice fan experience, even without a whole lot of technical know-how. Just take a couple of minutes and watch a YouTube tutorial, and you're on your way.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a platform now called Veeps, Veeps,
Mm,
and that's a ticketed live stream platform. We've partnered with them, and we're trying to, obviously use it for our artists, but we're also, selling it and promoting it with venues, and it uses OBS. OBS is what gets you into that sphere and allows you to take your broadcast and land it somewhere where you're selling tickets to a virtual stage. And
right.
you said it correct. Anybody can learn how to do it as long as they have a little bit of patience and a good internet connection.
Absolutely. So, and you alluded to this earlier. You said that necessity is the mother of invention. Obviously, it's not an original quote, but
Nope.
um, with that, what are some areas where you feel that the live show circuit really needed to have improved long before this, and where that opportunity is really starting to shine now?
You're going to see it a lot with safety and health measures taken at venues when they start reopening more and more. And there's going to be a lot of things that promoters are going to be more conscious of that they never were when it comes to spectator safety and public health. And there's a lot that has been happening when it comes to how these deals are made with concerts. Obviously, I'm sure you've read about this Live Nation memo that went out that's going to talk that basically the bottom line of it is that promoters are no longer going to be the ones handling all the risk. A lot of the risk is also going to shift now to the artist. But venues are going to start having more and more of a capability to become essentially a TV studio in addition to the venue. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of renovation. It doesn't take a lot of tech to make it happen. It's not even going to take a lot of money. It just really is going to take more bodies to operate this equipment. And some theaters may make it as simple as setting up 4 GoPros around the venue, one on stage left, one in, by the orchestra, one by front of house, wherever.
Mhm.
And they're just going to have one person. Maybe it's a kid or a volunteer or an intern who's just hitting the arrow keys and switching between camera angles while the feed from the board is running through OBS. And then therefore you've all of a sudden found a way to stream your concert in your venue to a virtual audience who maybe couldn't get a ticket to the actual show because of social distancing.
Mhm.
And even when they return to full capacity, a lot of bands have started streaming their shows live, and that says something about the era that we're entering in and that we're forced into because of a pandemic.
Absolutely. Now, with just kind of the internet age of the music industry, live shows were one of the last things that we have where it's like, okay, we can physically touch our fans. We can sell our merchandise. It's one of the last remaining experiences, right? There's not really any more opening a CD, reading liner notes. A lot of it we're interacting with our phones, to get our music content. And now it sounds like live shows are kind of going that same way. How do you? Because I honestly don't see virtual live stream concerts taking the place of actual in-person shows. But how do you
Yeah.
see those two opposing ideas kind of melding together as we move forward?
Well, I think you're absolutely correct. There is an experience that cannot be matched with a live show, and I think you can compare it to what happened when kids started buying more vinyl in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
People that went away for the reason that there was this thing called the CD, and then eventually the MP3, and then people stopped buying records altogether. But people missed that experience of opening a vinyl record or an album and just you know maybe wiping the dust off of the LP, or feeling the weight of a 180 gram, just really having that experience of opening an album and putting it on and feeling like you're owning a piece of the music. That goes away the second that you buy an MP3 from iTunes or stream it on Spotify. I'm sorry, I don't care how you splice it, but it's the same thing with concerts. There may be more and more innovations when it comes to streaming it, but there's nothing that will ever compare to seeing it live, ever. And yes, there will be more ways of streaming it. I think there's going to have to be a hybrid when they're all recovering from COVID-19. But even after the fact, I still believe there's going to be more and more concerts, and eventually, God willing, there will be a vaccine that takes care of this. I think it's going to take a few years before everybody gets it right, but I do think that there's still always going to be a future for the artists to get out there and go on stage in some capacity. It may just look a little different, but there's nothing that will ever compare to a live show. And if it does go out of style for a little bit, you better believe that it'll be back.
Absolutely. Now, and you talked about before how pre-COVID, you might be in the office really early, really
Mm-hmm.
late, kind of taking calls around the clock, and now you've got more time for your family, maybe hobbies or anything like that. What changes, or I should say, how do you feel like your job has changed since the pandemic, and what changes do you feel are going to be lasting into the future?
Well, we've in terms of my company, we've gotten very comfortable with a virtual office. I got to say, there's something wonderful about instead of having to get on a train and go into the city for an hour and a half in the morning, or even for our people that live in New York, having to get on a subway or walk to the office.
Mhm.
There's something nice about being able to have your coffee at home. And if for me, I have a 1-year-old baby, and I've gotten to see my daughter take her first steps and learn how to say dada all during the course of this pandemic. I would never have really probably seen that in person. I would have had to hear my wife call me and say, "You'll never guess what she did today." But now I'm right downstairs. I can just run up the stairs if she's doing something cool. And I think that our agents have gotten more and more comfortable with it, with the virtual office, and I think that's something that we may even transition to more and more permanently as time goes on, because running an office in New York City, no matter how successful the agency is a steep thing.
Yeah.
And I think for our artists, they've had to find new ways of staying motivated and creative in their own space, and finding new ways of staying connected artistically. If they're all in separate environments, they've had to find and utilize new technology of jamming and just writing music. But they have the technology. It's just a matter of getting comfortable with it. And I think it's given us. I do a lot more Zoom meetings, which is great, because I was usually just picking up the phone every couple minutes at the office and calling people, but now I'm actually seeing more of them. So that's definitely a plus. We're seeing more artists and more buyers on a day-to-day basis. I just, after a while, Zoom can only be so comfortable, and you just want to shake somebody's hand.
Right. Absolutely. So are you Zoom fatigued yet?
Yes, I was Zoom fatigued within like a week, and my family my side of the family has a Zoom meeting every other week, and my wife's family's all around here, so we see them. But even that, it's like at the end of the day of working, and 8 different Zoom calls or however many that day, and then just all of a sudden, oh wait, we got to call my family. As much as I love to see them, it's just like you're on Zoom, and then you're just like, yep, feels like another meeting. And but God bless, you gotta connect and keep doing business, and we do live in an age where we have the technology.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to get into a bit of a lightning round.
Sure.
All right. So what's your favorite song?
Favorite song? Oh God, lightning round. I guess if we're doing lightning round, Stairway to Heaven.
All right. Favorite artist?
uh Danger Mouse.
Okay. What's one thing you wish more artists understood about the industry?
How much rejection you have to go through to actually get somewhere.
Okay. And on the flip side, what's one thing you wish the overall music industry understood more about its artists?
That these are human beings, and they have real emotions and feelings when it comes to their art. It's their life's work.
Okay. And if there was one thing you could say to young Jack, about navigating the industry or just life advice, what would it be?
Don't take yourself so seriously at such a young age, and be open to more, and don't be so afraid of rejection from the start. You had to kind of grow into it, and don't be such an idiot with your future wife when you first met her. Not that has to do with this, but
It's all
we're
good.
talking. If we're
That's
looking
good.
back.
That's good advice. All right. So before we wrap up, You did mention a news story that I do think we should touch on. So, explain a little bit more about this Live Nation situation and what it means for artists moving forward.
I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as an unintentional leak when it comes to entertainment.
Mhm.
That leak was meant to be leaked at the time. It was totally intentional, and I think its purpose was to really test the waters and see what people were going to say about it and think about it. And the main takeaway from it, if you're an artist or an agent, is that they're looking to shift the risk that has been on the promoter's head for the last 100 or 200 years, however long they've been doing live concerts. And that's big, because we're used to a significant amount of risk being on the promoter.
Mhm.
And they're basically saying we took too big of a hit. We've suffered for long enough, and we cannot afford to go back out there and invest in all this and potentially lose it all and then some. So we're gonna share the risk with the artist, which I'm always gonna side with the artist. That's my livelihood, and I always believe in doing best by them. But I definitely understand what Live Nation's trying to do. I don't love how they're trying to make it so that if an artist cancels for a reason that may not make sense to a promoter, that they are liable for double the fee. That
Mhm.
there's too much gray right with something like that. If an artist just is in an area where they do not feel comfortable to travel and they cannot get on a plane, all of a sudden now they owe double, or even if a few months out, if one of them gets the virus and they don't know how their body's going to react if they cancel, there's too much gray with it. And when it comes to the insurance, again, I get all that, and I get the cancellation. And the one thing that actually didn't bother me that much was the festival guarantees being dropped 20%. I mean,
Mhm.
now it's more across the board, but with festivals, I understood it because usually agents were inflating the price at least 30%, if not more, for a
Mhm.
festival appearance. So that makes sense. But you can only make Live Nation is the devil that you make it. They can be wonderful, or if you are having a rough time of it, you can want to curse them. But I've had every kind of interaction with them. I've had great interactions with them, and I've worked with some tremendous people over there. And I've also had other interactions where it's just very corporate and set, which I understand. But I can't fault anybody for changing the way they do business at a time like this, especially for somebody like Live Nation, who is looking at potentially drastic, ridiculous losses if this pandemic continues and they don't start sharing the risk.
Yeah.
And I think no matter how much money they get investments from a public sector or private donations or private investments, it's not going to solve the problem of an act of God.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when your strategy as a company has been to buy up venues, right? Like that's a huge risk, and then nobody saw this coming. But yeah, I mean, there's got to be some way to kind of reverse course. As an agent, what do you feel like the best middle ground or the most ideal situation might end up being?
For Live Nation, you mean?
Well, for all parties involved, because
I
obviously
think,
nobody wants to take all the
yeah.
risk.
Well, I definitely understand sharing it. I think there needs to be a bit more of a hybrid of what used to be and what they're looking for. Insurance is fine. It doesn't cost as much as people think, and editing the force majeure clause on these contracts and the cancellation policies, we're seeing it across the board with every kind of promoter or venue, even the ones that aren't under the Live Nation umbrella.
Mhm.
So I get it. I think I really think though the thing that needs to be edited is the artist's fault and liability when it comes to cancellation for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And when it comes to streaming, that's a big part of it too, because the revenue there could be huge, and you don't want Live Nation to cannibalize all of that if it does become successful. And you just want balance. You want a little bit more balance, because yes, if you're looking at who was getting screwed before, it was definitely Live Nation, and then artists were getting slightly less screwed. So maybe we all just need to be a little bit more screwed together. I hope not, but I do want to keep shows moving, and I can't wait to get back out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jack, this has been a super informative conversation. I'm really grateful for our time together.
I appreciate you having me. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, no problem at all. So, for those who want to stay in touch with you or keep up with what you and BiCoastal Productions are doing, how can they do that?
BiCoastalProductions.com is our website. We're always interested in interesting artists, interesting technology, interesting things you want to share with us. So do feel free to reach out. The best email for general inquiries is talent@BiCoastalProductions.com. I know it's a generic email, but it will be read at some point, hopefully very soon. We do get a large amount of emails, and we try to respond to just about everybody if possible. So do not be a stranger. I really do welcome all kinds of artists and new people.
Excellent. Well, I will leave the link and the email in the description of this video and podcast episode. But again, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you.
No
Be
problem.
safe.
You too.